When did humans first appear on Earth? The untold story of ancient mankind. You're standing in a cave in the Moroccan desert, and it's dusty, and it's hot, and honestly it smells like a mix of wood smoke and something that died a long time ago. It's roughly 300,000 years ago. There's no Wi-Fi, obviously. There's no Postmates, there's no group chat blowing up because someone left you on read, there's just you, a fire, some stone tools, and a face that, if you squint, kind of looks like your uncle's. Weird thought. But also not wrong. Because the person crouched next to that fire is, technically, one of the very first Homo sapiens to ever exist. Not a caveman in the cartoon sense. Not a knuckle-dragging grunt machine, a person with a brain basically the same size as yours, with plans, probably. With opinions about the guy who keeps hogging the fire. Somewhere in that skull is the beginning of everything: language, art, cities, smartphones, reality, TV, all of it, coiled up in a species that doesn't even know it's about to take over the entire planet. Short version, humans didn't appear the way lightning strikes. There was no single Tuesday where a monkey turned into a man. It was slower, messier, weirder than you think. So here's the real question. The one we're actually chasing today: when and how did our species, Homo sapiens, actually show up on Earth? And how do we even know? Let's talk stakes for a second, because this isn't just trivia. Every human alive right now, every single one, 8 billion of us, every race, every continent, every language, descends from a population that at one point may have numbered in the low thousands, not millions, thousands. Some researchers have floated numbers as low as 10,000 to 20,000 breeding individuals during certain bottleneck periods. Let that land for a second. The entire human race, the internet, nuclear weapons, the Sistine Chapel, TikTok dances, almost didn't happen, because our ancestors nearly blinked out of existence more than once. And the story of how we survived, spread, and eventually buried our closest relatives. Yes, buried them, more on that later, is way stranger than the caveman evolves into businessman chart you saw in middle school. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly where, when, and how modern humans first show up in the fossil record, why scientists keep pushing that date further back, and why the single birthplace story might not even be true. Let's get into it. Here's what most people assume: humans evolved in East Africa, somewhere in the Ethiopia-Kenya, Tanzania corridor, around 200,000 years ago, and that was that clean origin point, one region, one moment, done. Except that's not really the reality anymore. That was the leading theory for decades, largely built around famous fossil finds like Homo Kibish in Ethiopia. But newer discoveries have scrambled the picture. Turns out, the real story isn't a single spotlight moment in one valley, it's more like a slow simmering Pan-African stew, with different populations in different regions contributing traits over tens of thousands of years, occasionally mixing, occasionally isolating, long before anyone we'd recognize as fully modern walked out of Africa. The birthplace of humanity might not be a place, it might be a process. Let's start the evidence cascade with the fossil that broke the old model completely, Jebel Irhoud. In 2017, a team led by paleoanthropologist Jean-Jacques Hublin published findings on skulls and stone tools recovered from a site called Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, thousands of miles from the cradle of humanity, everyone expected. The bones were dated to roughly 300,000 years old, using thermoluminescence dating on burnt flint tools found alongside them. That's not a small correction. That pushed the known origin of Homo sapiens back by about 100,000 years overnight, and it moved the location from East Africa to North Africa. The skulls had modern, human-shaped faces, but the brain case was still elongated, more primitive, more archaic-looking than yours or mine. In other words, face of the future. Brain still catching up. The prehistoric equivalent of a phone, with a modern touchscreen still running dial-up internet on the inside. Theory number 1 then. Modern humans didn't evolve in one nursery, they evolved gradually, across the entire African continent, in overlapping regional populations that periodically exchange genes, a model researchers now call African multiregionalism. Not one Eden, a whole continent's worth of Edens, loosely networked. Case Study 2, Homo Kibish, Ethiopia. This is the site that held the oldest Homo sapiens title for decades, originally dated to around 195,000 years old by geologist and dating specialist Frank Brown in the late 1960s and formally described by Richard Leakey's team. Even after Jebel Irhoud dethroned it as the oldest, Homo Kibish still matters because, get this, later redating using argon dating on volcanic ash layers above the fossils pushed its age estimate to potentially over 230,000 years. The ground scientists thought they understood, kept getting older under their feet. Literally. Not metaphorically, the sediment layers themselves, when retested with better equipment, kept revealing older and older dates, like the Earth was slowly admitting it had been hiding something. Case Study 3, the Herto skulls, also Ethiopia, dated to about 160,000 years old, discovered by Tim White's team in 1997. These are significant because they show something genuinely unsettling: cut marks. Deliberate cut marks on the skulls, consistent with defleshing, a practice some researchers linked to early mortuary ritual rather than cannibalism for calories. Which means, 160,000 years ago, humans may already have been doing something to their dead that wasn't just leave the body for the hyenas, they were doing something. A ritual. A process. Grief. Maybe, or something adjacent to it. Expressed through the only language available, the body itself. Think about that for a second. Before writing. Before agriculture. Before the wheel. Humans were already treating death as something that required a response. Case Study 4. Genetics. Fossils only tell part of the story, DNA tells the rest. Geneticists use something called a molecular clock, measuring mutation rates in mitochondrial DNA, passed only through mothers, and Y chromosome DNA, passed only through fathers, to estimate how far back all living humans share a common ancestor. The famous, slightly misleading nickname for this is Mitochondrial Eve, not a single woman who was the only human alive, but the single woman whose maternal line happens to be the only one that survived unbroken to today. Estimates place her somewhere between 150,000 and 200,000 years ago, likely in Africa. Y chromosome. Adam. The equivalent on the paternal side is estimated at a broadly similar, though not identical, time frame. Two threads tens of thousands of years apart, in some models, both leading back into the same African population. Here's a chain of questions worth sitting with. If all of humanity's maternal lines trace to one woman, does that mean she was special? Was she the first real human, or was she just lucky? The answer, frustratingly, is the third one. She wasn't uniquely important in her own time. She's only important now, because of who happened to survive. Genetics doesn't reward greatness. It rewards descendants. Case Study 5, Behavioral Modernity and specifically, Blombos Cave in South Africa. Excavated by archaeologist Christopher Henshelwood. This site produced deliberately engraved ochre pieces, geometric crosshatch patterns, dated to around 75,000 to 100,000 years old. This matters because looking modern and acting modern turn out to be two completely different milestones. You can have anatomically modern bones for 200,000 years and still not have symbolic art, jewelry, or abstract thought showing up in the archaeological record until much later. Blombos also produced shell beads, deliberately pierced and probably strung, dated to roughly 75,000 years ago, the prehistoric equivalent of jewelry, of self-expression, of someone looking in a puddle and thinking, I want to look good today. That instinct, vanity, basically, is at least 75,000 years old. Deal with that. Case Study 6, the failed migrations. Most people assume humans left Africa once, in one clean wave, around 60,000 years ago, and just spread out. Except we now know there were multiple attempts, and most of them failed. Fossils at School and Kufsi, in modern-day Israel, dated to around 90,000 to 120,000 years ago, show Homo sapiens living in the Levant, tens of thousands of years before the successful migration. But that population appears to have died out, or been reabsorbed. possibly outcompeted by Neanderthals, who were better adapted to the colder climates that followed, possibly wiped out by disease. Possibly just unlucky. It wasn't until roughly 60,000 to 70,000 years ago that a migration out of Africa actually stuck, eventually populating literally every continent except Antarctica, and once it stuck, it moved fast. Evidence from Jebel Bay rock shelter in northern Australia, dated using optically stimulated luminescence by archaeologist Chris Clarkson's team, suggests humans reached Australia by at least 65,000 years ago, meaning they crossed open ocean on some kind of watercraft tens of thousands of years before anything resembling recorded history. No maps. No compass. Just open water and a hunch. Now here's the gear shift. Because the story of when did humans first appear is inseparable from a much darker question. What happened to everyone else? Because here's the thing, nobody tells you in the tidy version of this story, Homo sapiens was not the only human species on Earth for most of our existence. For the vast majority of the last 300,000 years, we shared this planet with Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans across Asia, and possibly still surviving pockets of Homo erectus in Southeast Asia, along with the strange, small-bodied Homo floracenus, nicknamed the Hobbits, on the island of Flores in Indonesia, who may have persisted until as recently as 50,000 years ago. That means multiple human species coexisted on Earth at the same time, within the same evolutionary eye blink, for far longer than Homo sapiens has existed alone. And then, one by one, they vanished. Neanderthals disappear from the fossil record around 40,000 years ago. Denisovans. Slightly later. Homo florecensis. Later still. The timing lines up uncomfortably closely with when and where Homo sapiens arrived in each region. We know, from ancient DNA, extracted from Neanderthal and Denisovan bones, by geneticists like Svante Pääbo, whose work later earned a Nobel Prize, that we didn't just replace them, we interbred with them. Most non-African humans today carry roughly 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. Some populations in Melanesia and Southeast Asia carry up to 4 to 6% Denisovan DNA. So it wasn't clean extinction. It was something closer to absorption, a slow blending followed by disappearance, and we still don't fully know how much of that disappearance was competition for resources, climate pressure, disease, or outright violence. What we do know is this. We are, quite literally, the last human species standing, out of at least half a dozen that once existed. And a piece of the others is still riding around inside most of us, in our genome, whether we know it or not. So, back to that cave in Morocco, 300,000 years ago. The fire, the smoke, the guy who might be your extremely distant, extremely great-grandfather. When did humans first appear? Not on one day, not in one place. Somewhere between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago, across a patchwork of African populations that slowly, unevenly, became us, and then, tens of thousands of years later, walked out into a world already occupied by other kinds of humans, and became the only ones left. That guy by the fire didn't know any of that. He didn't know he was a beginning. He was just trying to stay warm, probably annoyed at somebody, definitely hungry, and in a way, that's the most human detail of all. The big, sweeping story of our species was built entirely out of small, unremarkable moments, like that one, repeated for thousands of generations, by people who had absolutely no idea what they were starting. Next time you're annoyed about something small. Bad Wi-Fi. A long line. Whatever. It might be worth remembering that being annoyed by small things is, itself, one of the oldest human traits we've got. What do you think actually happened to the Neanderthals? Climate? Competition? Or something worse? Let me know in the comments.